Hello, guys. How's it going? Hey, Daniel, how are you?
Hey, great. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good. Just a bunch of meetings today, so a lot going on. I like it. It says on your back, "Hey, I'm Daniel Schneider," even though you have a
Uh,
tag there at the bottom that says the Daniel Schneider. So yeah, we
I
got
always put this background, yeah, if someone
yeah,
wants to know my name or something, yeah.
nice. So let's just wait for a few more minutes for folks to join. Appreciate everybody that's joining in right now. We announced it, I believe it was on Monday, that we're doing a quick webinar together with Daniel, who is a legend in the disability space, tuning in out of Tel Aviv, sunny Tel Aviv. I've been there a few times myself, having worked for a bunch of companies. Yeah, and deliverability, of course, is always a hot topic. So very excited to be sharing the stage also with other people. And so this is actually streamed on quite a few platforms, so LinkedIn, YouTube, etc., I believe also on Twitter, and is recorded, I believe. I'm just going to check now. I think, yeah, it is recorded. Blah, blah, blah. I think it is recorded. Excellent. So should we just dive right in, Daniel? Sounds good. I'll
Yeah,
do a quick
I'm
intro.
ready. So,
Awesome. So I'll just share my screen. Share. Settings. Sorry. And awesome. So today we're going to talk about unlocking client growth with warmed up emails and best practices and hacks. So just to introduce myself, so I'm Frank. I've been running a company called Salesforge and also another company called Mailforge. And essentially we just send a lot of good emails and help with infrastructure. So being in sales for over a decade, also led large sales teams of over 50 people. And work in different spaces, whether that's Black Crow, SimilarWeb, Google, etc. I'm not going to talk too much about myself, so let's jump over to you, Daniel, just to introduce yourself as well.
yeah, I'm an email deliverability geek and sending emails for over, I think, 8 years already.
Nice.
Also building some agents and AI agents. And yeah, I love skydiving. About to climb the 7 summits. Already finished 2 of them.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and hopefully we'll have a very good webinar here and a lot of interesting things to share.
Yeah, excellent. So what was your last skydive then, Daniel?
Last time was around 6 months ago. You need to be very relaxed when you jump, otherwise you forget to open it. So
And
and
being, I
it
guess,
can be crucial.
being a startup founder, it's very hard to relax, right? So
Yeah, I think you can relate. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I typically, average somewhere between 10 to 20 meetings, so it's very hard to relax. And then in between all of that, you jump on a webinar and talk about good old cold email. So I'm gonna walk through a few of the things. So Daniel, feel free also to jump in and actually put your own take. Or if you want to add some insights on particular slides. But cold email, so from what I've seen so far, and when I talk to typically hundreds of customers all around the world about cold emailing, typically you kind of bump into the topic of naturally leads, and targeting the right people is like super important, right? Because what's the point of sending sort of emails or having great availability if you're just targeting the wrong people? So leads is just something that's huge. Of course, it impacts your performance. It impacts whether you will get spam reported or not. But we're not going to focus as part of this session on leads itself at all. We're only going to focus on the rest of the things in deliverability. Once you get your leads, right, when you have done your targeting and you have gotten your leads against your ICP, typically the next thing becomes, okay, you really need to start scaling. And when you scale, you also need to think about sort of staying out of spam at scale. And the reason why scaling is so important is simply because there's, at any given time, I believe the stat says that only 3% of the people that are in the market for what is it that you're actually selling. So if you know those stats and you have typically sales targets that you need to attain, well, I mean, you will need to reach out typically to hundreds of people to book a few meetings here and there, and then actually close those deals. And of course, when you start scaling, particularly when you're just doing that from your primary domain, you will typically receive a bunch of spam reports, because irrespective of how good your leads are, irrespective of how good your copy is, you will definitely get spam reports. It's typically what I call guaranteed to happen. And that's what leads actually to deliverability issues, and there's a bunch of other things actually that Daniel can chip in as well. And then the final thing that you can basically sort of a huge part in deliverability is the copy, and what's in the copy, what's the content, what are the links, and many other things. So yeah, these are the three things that I typically discuss on sort of what I call the three sort of pillars in here. Daniel, anything else that you would typically add, or you have seen, or that you're discussing typically very frequently?
Yeah, so I would say right now the world's shifting to the direction where the cold emails would be very targeted, and then you have to send less, and then you have a few benefits. First, you have you much more satisfied because you have less deliverability issues. Plus, if you do some, I think in this presentation we'll talk about it. That if you target the right people, write the right messages to these people, you get much more results. So yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, awesome. So so maybe on the scaling part, right? So the second image, when we looked at scaling, so a lot of people, when they scale, and maybe back in the day, so maybe 2 years ago, a lot of people just, when they thought about scaling, they just started to send hundreds of emails, maybe sometimes thousands of emails from a single mailbox. And that was maybe the case, and Gmail, maybe Outlook allowed to do that. But these days, due to some of the mega trends that we would see in the space, which is more and more emails being sent over the years, and there's more and more bad actors that are sending essentially ransomware. There's phishing attempts, of course. And what happens naturally is that Gmail and Outlook start to introduce restrictions. And what typically then happens is you start to reduce volume per mailbox due to Gmail and Outlook sort of penalizing you. Now, typically the whole industry, or most of the industry, typically would say, okay, you should be sending about 50 emails per inbox or per mailbox per day. But according to you, Daniel, I believe you can send a lot more emails, and using, I guess, warm or using sophisticated, essentially, deliverability tools. Can you maybe elaborate maybe on this part? How you're able to achieve that? Why you're able to send more? Like, what does it have to do with?
Yeah, so I think it's like a myth that you can send only 50 emails per inbox per day. It's like a benchmark, and it became like a Bible. But in general, the email provider can allow you to send much more, right? So in Gmail, you can send G Suite, you can send 2,000. If you have your own, your own infrastructure, you can send as much as you want. So, but you need to behave as a good sender. If you behave as a good sender, then you can send much more. So this is just a number. With the technologies that we developed, or any other technology available out there, you can show Google that you are a good sender. We have users sending millions a month, millions of emails a month. So how is it possible? When we show or the user show that he's sending good emails, people interact with the emails, you can send more. Why you're limited to 50? You can send 200, 500, etc. Yeah.
But is it just out of curiosity, is it just predominantly driven due to because you're still going to get a bunch of spam reports, right, when you are sending, let's say, at a much higher scale? So you just sort of combat I guess these, let's call it, bad signals through the more sophisticated, let's say, warm-up capabilities, right? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, I think warm-up message. I mean, this world. I mean, when you balance between what you send and the interactions you do, a positive interaction, so it's okay. So if you have 2 spam reports a day, but thousands good activities, so it's nothing. And then I would say if you send only 50 emails a day and you have 5 spam reports, so it's 10%. No, it's more than no, it's 5 divided. Yes, 10%, right?
Yep. Yeah.
10% of spam reports. So your domain is almost dead. And if you want to be more sophisticated as a sender, you go to Google Postmaster and you see what's going on there, and you will see that your domain will be dead. So 50 is now, I mean, it's a number that everyone says, but without any, I mean, you can send much more, you can send much less, and everything will be okay. Depends on the people and how they behave with your emails.
Gotcha. So maybe to dumb it down for everybody, so you would just simply say, in order to send more, I guess, cold emails, or where you typically are at risk of getting a spam report, you would just send a lot more also warm-up emails?
Yeah, I would not call it. Yeah, if you want to call it warm up, is okay. But good activity emails. Yeah, good activity, good activity emails. And if you, so, as I said, we have users sending millions every month. How is it possible? I mean, it's definitely possible. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, awesome. All right, so so we kind of talked about the benchmarks and how many emails the industry typically would recommend, how many more you could send, let's say, through Warme. But typically, then if you are a cold emailer and you send a lot of domains, email durability is typically tracked on a domain level, and typically we'd recommend setting what's called secondary domains. These are also called burner domains, essentially. Parallel domains, a lot of different names, but typically it's not recommended really to do subdomains. However, subdomains are totally fine, or from what we've seen, to use as part of the inbound motion. So let's say you have a newsletter running, and let's say it's part of your company. So instead of setting a separate domain for the newsletter, you just set a subdomain. You could newsletter.tesla.com and kind of use that as a subdomain to send out. Now you can kind of chip in here later, Daniel, on this. But yeah, we don't recommend sending essentially emails from the primary. I have not yet seen an example where, I don't know, you have a rather sort of fresh domain, or your startup, let's say, you don't have, let's say, domain age, and you've been able to successfully send large volume of emails. But naturally, if you're somebody like Salesforge.com, etc., you can probably send a lot of emails, right? Because most of those emails don't get reported as spam. And then you can set up a bunch of these different domains, being secondary domains, through registrars like GoDaddy, Cloudflare, etc. There's also something that we release, Mailforge.ai, which can help you do in about 5 minutes. But we typically don't recommend setting up sort of a lot of mailboxes per domain. Simply sort of keeping the volumes low on per domain basis. And again, so something that typically the industry would recommend is just sending about 50 emails per inbox per day, 20 for warm up and about 30 for cold. Now, a lot of people that I know in a lot of different communities, they actually start to reducing the number of cold emails even down to 20 for various different reasons. Again, it's very hard to sort of to give what we call proper guidance, because naturally Gmail and Outlook, the two main email service providers, will never tell you how to circumvent any of their policies, or how to kind of improve your deliverability rates. But yeah, Daniel, anything that you'd like to add here?
I would say I just want to explain why we send less or connect less inboxes per domain. Because we have four things that impacts on deliverability. First is the message itself. Yep. Second is the mailbox under the domain. So if you work for the company for 10 years already, and you employee come into the company, your deliverability as an older employee will be better. So this is the second thing that we figure out that impacts. Third is the domain, and fourth the IP. So if we talk about these four things, if you send less emails per domain and connect less inboxes per domain, then you put your domain under less risk. But finally, it's a business decision. Okay, it's a business decision. If you want, you can connect hundreds of mailboxes under one domain, and you want to blast in one day everything, and you don't care. So why you care about it? So it's a business decision. It's mainly what we see here. It's a business decision. But then, yeah. So, but then you need to calculate your
But I guess, like you mentioned, Daniel, so it has to do more less about actually how many emails you send, but more about, I guess, how many actual spam reports you get, right, on X number of emails that are being sent out, right? So
You
And from
reduce
what
the
I see,
risk per domain. This is what you do here. Sorry. Yeah.
yeah. I think it's very hard for anybody in the industry to talk about spam rates and a few other things. It's much easier if you just say how many emails roughly you should be sending out, right? So just
Definitely. Yeah.
because
Definitely. Yeah.
you're sort of on the same page, and it's less discussion essentially to be had. But it's quite complicated actually. What goes under the hood of 30 cold emails essentially. But yeah,
Right.
like IPs, spam reports, and a few many other things, bounce rates, all that stuff. So okay,
Yeah.
cool. So once the infrastructure is set up, so right, we've got the, you want to warm up the infrastructure. So this is where I'm going to leave it to you, Daniel, to kind of, kind of jump on this email validation. So making sure, when you are sending emails, you don't have very high bounce rates. Typically, what we're seeing is you want to keep your bounce rate below 2%. And then, yeah, like you mentioned, copy, and also mentioned copy. Essentially, more of the static copy that you send out, the more problems that we're seeing typically. And just today, for example, I went through my spam folder, and a lot of emails have, there was a label by Gmail essentially that says similar messages have been found, have been marked as spam in the past. So essentially, the more of the same content that you're sending across, more and more people, the more problems you will have. And essentially, Spintax allows you to essentially randomize the content. That just was I think the next version of cold emails, which sort of popped up, I think, as a concept sort of 2-3 years ago, and it became very popular. But with all the stuff that happens just in the AI space, you're able to actually do what I'll call sort of unique computations, actually craft a unique email to every single recipient. And that's what I would say probably is what we call the pinnacle of copy, right? If every copy can be unique at scale. But yeah, Daniel, would you like to add maybe more about why just the domains need to be warmed up? Why you can't just send emails, I guess, from day zero?
Yeah, so we made a few researches. You can buy a domain, send immediately cold emails, but
Okay.
after a few days, your domain will die. You can send you can send always. You can send without warming up, nobody will block you, but you can buy a domain, connect to an email account, and start sending emails. After a few days, everything will go to spam. You can try it, and it actually works if you don't care about, long-term relationship with your domain. But why you need to warm up? When you buy a new domain, actually it's listed on some block lists, and these spam filters look after you. And on the first months, nobody knows about your domain. And if you start sending cold emails, or people start mark you as a spammer, or people are not responding to you, nothing with your emails, your reputation goes down, and you will immediately go to spam and all the emails afterwards. So first, if it's possible for you as a business to wait at least 1 month after buying a domain and warm up this domain. What does it mean? You slowly start sending emails from this domain. Start in the warm up process. You show positive activity on your domain. If you can even start sending content in the warm up that related to your actual sending, it will help. Google not recently, I think a few months ago, posted an article that they start analyzing the content in your email. And it's very important when you start interacting that you don't, talk about shit in your warm up, but you talk actually about what you're going to send. If you're a finance business and you start, a relationship with different other accounts about finance, it will help a lot to increase the reputation of your domain. And not only a domain, if you have your own IPs or your IP reputation, etc., etc. So Google or Google or Outlook or wherever start accepting your messages, and we saw a significant difference when you do these interactions in the topic that you are gonna send and in the language. So we saw a difference of around 7% of final, open rates or reply rates when you do the warm up in the language that you are about to send the emails, versus let's say you warmed up in English, but then you send the content on French or other language. So all this you start showing actually the warm up process is showing showing the spam filters, etc. All these companies, there are a lot of companies doing analyzing what you're doing. Showing that you are actually a good sender, you are going to send good emails, but can kill your domain is if you're sent to not to the right prospect and they mark you as a spammer, and actually this can be very very bad for your domain.
Cool, thanks for that. All right, I think we touched upon actually quite a few things already that you just summed up. But these are essentially pretty much the 5, I guess, points. I'm not going to kind of go through them too much, but it's pretty much what you summed up in 5 points, and let's just move on to the next section. So there's just one slide on kind of warm me. And I know you do a lot of kind of different things. You already touched about languages, touched about kind of particular topic. You also mentioned you connect to Google Postmaster. Maybe that's something that would be good that you mention what it is and why maybe that is important. Yeah, maybe feel free just to maybe just mention like a minute or so about this.
Yeah, so I would touch the Google Postmaster thing. So if you're a heavy sender, heavy cold email sender, whether you are doing cold emails, I mean, for your B2B business or B2C as affiliate, for example, or any other sender, you want to connect to Google Postmaster, which is a free tool from Google to show you your domain reputation and IP reputation. And this is actually impacts a lot on your deliverability. If your domain reputation goes, I mean, medium or low or bad, you can immediately know that probably your emails will go to spam. What we developed actually is we connected directly to your Google Postmaster. We connected to the heart of the deliverability doctor, and then we don't need your information from you anymore. So we take all the information from Google Postmaster, which has a lot of information, and then we analyze with our machine learning algorithms that we developed, and accordingly we fix it with our warm-up process. So it's not just sending back and forth, and pray that something will happen. The same as sending cold emails. You don't want to, I know this phrase, spray and pray. You want to be very targeted. You want to send to the right people, the right message on the right time. The same thing we are doing in the warm-up. We analyze what is the problem. I mean, the brain analyze what is the problem and fixing accordingly. If you have a problem with Google, for example, we know how to fix the problem with Google. If you have with Outlook, the same thing, etc. And and we are focusing only on the deliverability problem, which is crucial for the success of cold emails. And it's not an easy problem because it's a black box. And we are almost 50 people in the company, and half of the people only doing the research, how to solve it, how to develop things that will always try to improve the deliverability. And this is an interesting problem, and this is what we develop all the time in Warmy.
Cool, thanks for that. I guess this is just kind of goes into the Spintax example. If somebody's not familiar, this is just a random UI that I found on the internet. So essentially, you want to make sure you're not sending the exact same email to your prospects, and you want to sort of randomize what you're saying. So, for example, hey, aloha, hi. For example, you're saying the same thing essentially. You're saying hi, you're greeting a person, but you're saying using different words. And typically, at least 50% of the content has to be Spintax. This is something that I recommend. You can also do a bunch of sort of A to Z testing, which also improves that. But essentially, the less of a static content you have, the better your typically deliverability rates. And one thing that I don't advise to do is like hope your week is going well. So yeah. So when it comes to content, I know also you guys have a bunch of sort of free tools as well, like a template checker, like a, just check, whether there are any sort of spammy words that you can see in here, guys. But if you are just running essentially brand new campaigns, and you can, when you are crafting like a new copy, essentially, you want to make sure you are sort of pasting that into a tool like Warmy, etc., just to check whether there are any sort of spam words, any words that could essentially trigger spam filters. You also want to check how many links you have, etc. So don't bomb essentially your copy with unnecessary stuff. And essentially, the more sort of simple you keep it, the fewer the links, the better the readability, typically the better results you would have. Awesome. So now going to what I call the golden nugget. So this is kind of what I call the basics, and then we're gonna touch upon maybe a particular topic. And feel free to chip in, Daniel, here if you have any insights on a particular topic. For example, this one.
How did you do that?
This one here.
Do that actually?
My face.
Yeah.
You also want that one? So there are a bunch of tools essentially where you can create. You can just upload your face, and you get one of these. I can't remember which tool I used. It's been a while. But I use it for quite a few things, especially in Slack internally. But one thing, which is typically quite interesting for people, especially when they use maybe older tools where you sort of can't switch off the open tracking, or if you're just used to open tracking, then you tell them you need to disable open tracking, and they ask you why, and that's because trackers can harm your deliverability. That's kind of one thing. But the other thing, actually, the open these pixels, essentially these invisible images that you typically insert, depending on who you send to. Let's say you're sending to an Outlook account or a Gmail account, it triggers differently, it fires differently, that pixel, and hence it really depends. So essentially, typically when you send emails more to startups that are, I guess, more prone to having Gmail accounts, then you would typically always see much higher open rates versus, let's say, going after enterprise companies that have very strict email security policies in place, and they also have Outlook, where typically sending to Outlook accounts, you always have typically lower open rates. But from your perspective, Daniel, why would you say, why someone should not track open rates? And maybe also, if you have an argument why you should track open rates. So it would be very interesting to hear.
Yeah, open rates, as you mentioned, is hurting email deliverability, but I would say it's a fake metric because actually right now this email companies opens the emails for you before you even see it, and a lot of things. I mean, some of the time people see the email but never downloaded this pixel, so it's a fake metric. What I would go after is emails has actually it's a tool to achieve something. I mean, some of the time it can be someone needs to see your invoice. Some of the time it's generate demos or sales. I don't know. So this is what I would measure. Finally, I mean, the reply rate or the demo rate or something. The open rates is either way, it's a fake number. You cannot rely on this number. If it's 30% open rate, it's never ever 30% of your people saw your email. I mean, maybe it's more, maybe it's less. Nobody knows. So, and the benchmark, people will say, okay, I have a benchmark. This benchmark was from our research. Even the benchmark doesn't mean anything. So it can go down, but still the reply rate will stay the same. So why you care about the reply rate? I would care only about the open rate. So I would care only about the reply rate, demo rate, whatever you're trying to achieve with your emails. It's a tool to achieve something. Is not the final goal is not open rate. So you don't need to fight with open rate.
Yeah, makes sense. There's on this topic, because it has been mentioned so many times. We actually just wrote a Help Center article on that, on all the possible reasons of why open rates essentially can be skewed in one direction or the other. And it's just something that I guess to educate, especially if you're in sales or you've been in sales for a long time, and then why it's sort of flawed. And I typically compare it sort of to impression data, like in Facebook ads. What do impressions actually mean to you? Actually, it doesn't mean much to you. You can just see, okay, a lot of people are sort of potentially looking at it, but what you probably really care about is the click-through rate, so people clicking on the ads, and whether they're actually converting at the end of the day. And this is how you should probably look at open tracking as well. Now, the next topic is sort of, golden nugget is around sort of inbox rotation, so rotating the mailboxes. And this just stems from the fact that, with a lot of softwares out there, maybe legacy software is a lot more, you're typically sending a lot of emails from a single mailbox. You're just front loading all the volume and you just send it out. But actually, one of the better ways to mimic essentially randomized sending, what typically a human would do, is you just, let's say if you have 10 mailboxes, an example, so let's say for the first lead, you would use mailbox 1, for example. For the second lead, you would use actually mailbox 2. For the third lead, you use actually mailbox 3. So you randomly select which of the you randomly assign essentially a mailbox for every single lead or for every single email, and that randomization just can improve your deliverability instead of kind of front loading all the, let's say, 30 emails, an example, and sending them sending them out like, I don't know, in the next 5 minutes, and then using the next mailbox and the next mailbox. So the more you randomize, similar to kind of Spintax, or the more you randomize the sending and the times and everything, it just can help you to stay under the radar. Now, the next topic is around ESP matching. So ESP means email service provider. So the space, the B2B space, naturally in particular, is dominated by heavily by Gmail and Outlook that provided services to B2B companies. And typically, you just want to be a good Samaritan, essentially, when it comes to these two particular email service providers. And you want to read up essentially what do they care about, etc., to improve your usability rates. But one of the things that sort of, I guess, stemmed over the last maybe sort of 12 months or so, one of the kind of newest things is like matching the ESPs. And that means essentially Gmail and Outlook don't necessarily like each other. And if most of your, say, customers are on Outlook, you may want to be sending from Outlook mailboxes, and also the same for Gmail. If most of your customers are actually on Gmail, you may want to consider just sending, you just have a bunch of Gmail accounts and send that to them. Now, the space is just evolving very fast. Daniel, what's your take on ESP matching? Is it actually working? Have you seen that this works, or there's no data to suggest actually this thing actually works?
I don't think I have something very, very smart to say, but the companies that actually reporting to this Gmail and Outlook, about problems, they are not related. They're outside of them. So I would say that it might be, but I'm not sure. I mean, gotcha. I'm not sure. I will not put a verdict. I know about this very well, but I don't have something very smart to say.
One of the things we've seen last week, for example, Outlook just released some of the restrictions last week. And we've seen, for example, that sending essentially from Gmail to an Outlook account or vice versa, we've seen sort of major issues popping up there, but actually sending Outlook to Outlook, everything was fine. So that's just an example. Whether that was a blip or not, it still is to be seen. But you are seeing sometimes things like that, but there's no what I would call hard evidence to suggest that sending from Outlook to Outlook is definitely better. The same with Gmail to Gmail. But naturally, if I would, let's say you work in the Gmail team, and essentially any email that arrives outside of Gmail, I have no visibility sort of, into that, because I don't own naturally that. I can't see naturally that mailbox, right? So if it's arrives outside of Gmail, so it arrives from Outlook, it maybe arriving from Yahoo or SMTP server. So of course, you would just expect that they will be just slightly more cautious, or there's more checks that are being run in the background. But yeah, personally, we have not seen very strong data to suggest that, but it's something, if you are setting up for the first time and you have to choose Gmail Outlook, then just ask your customers, essentially, is what I want to say here. Now, I think we covered this, but essentially spam word checking is definitely what you want to do. So I'm gonna outline here. I think we mentioned one of the slides, but essentially, again, it goes with the copy. Make sure you just check your copy, especially the first time. Train your brain not to say, sensitive words in the email like free or, I don't know, Nigerian prince or whatever, right? It also may trigger spam folders these days. But just sort of train your head not to use sensitive words in email going forwards. Now, maximum 3 emails in a sequence. So, of course, there's a bunch of email sequence tools out there. But sequence actually means, having 3 emails or more emails essentially being sent out. And with this code, I'm not going to essentially, what I'm trying to say, send just maximum 3 emails in a sequence. The reasoning of why you should send, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, essentially the probability of a reply after the 3rd email is just typically too small to warrant essentially sending another email. You're better off using essentially the capacity of a mailbox to be sending out emails to other prospects. But the second reason, which is typically the much better reason why you should not send more than 3, and sometimes actually some people say it's even 2, is just to reduce the number of spam reports that you essentially get against the domain, right, that you're sending it out of. Because I know that there's still companies out there that send like 10 emails in a sequence. And I just don't recommend doing that. You're definitely very high likely to be getting a lot more spam reports because of that, right? So typically what I recommend is, send 2 or 3 emails as part of a sequence over typically a span of 2 weeks. And then if the prospect did not opt out from your list and did not reply back to you, then re-engage after a quarter. Because one of the biggest problems in just generally outbound sales is the timing. When's the best time to actually engage with your prospect? And even though there's a lot of what's called trigger data when it comes to leads, etc., It does not apply to all industries, and it doesn't always work. So I just say, you reach out to a prospect and it's your ICP. There's no answer. Most likely, it's just not a priority right now. Reach out again after a quarter. So reach out essentially once a quarter, and essentially over the course of a year, you reach out 3 to 4 times. And this will allow you to essentially maximize your pipeline, essentially, that you're generating for your business. The next thing is sort of around something totally different. So, which is optimizing kind of these fewer bits. So fewer bits meaning before even the person opens up the email. So typically, actually, the person sees in a lot of the cases what is the subject line naturally, right? And the preview text also in the email. And there's a lot of sort of chatter out there about subject line. And actually, your email deliverability matters 10x more than talking about and never endlessly about subject lines. So if there's something that I would say about subject lines, keep it maximum to 2 words, and I would always use lowercase. Write it up. So because all the emails that you can see, for example, in this example, it just looks like it's an automated email. But if you write an email and has everything sort of lowercase, it just looks odd, essentially. And that oddness is essentially what interrupts the pattern when the user is scanning through all the emails and then deciding to open or not. But one of the other things, naturally, they make a decision on whether to open the email or not is just looking at the preview text. And typically in the preview text, you'll always see things like, "Hi, Daniel. Hey, Daniel. Howdy, Daniel," right? So it's always going to mention the first name of that individual. And what if you could write the email, or you can start an email in a very different way? And there are actually some newsletter platforms actually that are very good actually at pattern interrupt with the preview text. And do the same thing essentially with cold emails. Don't necessarily just maybe start off the email just the same way that everybody starts, like hi, hey, hello. Maybe just start it very differently. And by doing so, actually, you're interrupting the pattern, and essentially you are potentially, there's more likelihood essentially the person maybe opening your email. So always think about optimizing your preview text. Now, when the person actually opens the email, one of the things, a part of writing really great emails, which are highly personalized, highly relevant, you want to be driving them towards an action. And that action typically is not necessarily the downstream conversion being typically meeting booked or whatever the other action is, but it's to typically get a response from your prospect. So optimize towards the micro conversion being just a reply, being yes or no, not a priority, etc., rather than kind of hardcore going into I need to book as many meetings as possible. Because if you actually optimize more towards getting a reply, you're actually by default generating a lot more meetings. So and then you have to typically decide when it comes to call to action whether it is soft or hard. So a hard example would be like, hey, let's grab 15 minutes, tomorrow, next week. So you kind of putting them into position to kind of commit, and people don't typically like to commit. And typically I would say time is money. Why would I sit down with a person? I'm not even sure whether this is a priority or not. So this is why it's much better to ask like a quick open-ended question, like, is this a priority, right? Is this worth exploring? Is it worth chatting about? So essentially open them up, and they'll say no, yes, maybe, whatever, right? Instead of asking for time. And if you're going to say yes, this is a priority, then this is when you grab 15 minutes, right? But I typically then say with the second and the third email, it's totally fine to use a hard CTA. So sometimes people don't want to be necessarily talking to kind of back and forth, having the ping pong. It's much better to have a 15-minute chat about what is it that you're solving as a pain. And then hard CTA, in the second or third email, this is something that's totally fine to do so. But don't do it in the first email. Here's some example of much longer CTAs. If you are looking to use much longer CTAs, typically you want to mention some sort of numbers. I can generate for you, I don't know, 2 to 3 clients, 10 sales calls. I can generate for you 200K pipeline. And this is just in some of the examples where it's longer, but typically you are committing to something like a timeline, pipeline number, or whatever that is. Number 8, this applies, I guess, more for the US audience, more so, and potentially the UK audience, where it's just a lot more common to be using PS. And the PS just gives you another sort of opening. So let's say you have the main email of the body, and don't do what the guy did here, which is having just a bunch of links. But essentially, PS, it just gives you another opening, another opportunity to sort of provide free value essentially to your potential prospect. And it doesn't necessarily have to talk about your product. So for example, in our case, we have a deliverability checklist, and just a CSV file that I created sort of a long time ago. What are some of the things you want to sort of think about? And guess what? This drives a lot of replies. And when you're getting replies from your prospects, it's much better than getting spam report essentially, right? So if you can provide some form of value, like even in the form of a checklist, you get a reply back. That's also good for your deliverability. And typically, sorry, not typically, but it may lead essentially to then actually booking a call with that particular prospect. So do think about using PS, especially if you're targeting the Western audience. Clean signature also is very important. So one of the things that Warmy does is also provides a signature builder if you do need to build a signature. Now, only one thing, I guess, on the, Daniel, I would like to ask on the HTML front. So naturally, when you have, let's say, your profile picture, you have here a bunch of sort of icons, which are all HTML based. Wouldn't you say, though, that, you know, having a sort of what's called a plain text signature is a lot more powerful?
Definitely. It definitely having an HTML when you send a mass cold email can hurt your deliverability. I would say this is for, you know, when you started already the communication and you have a thread with your prospect, it seems much more serious, because when you send a lot of emails and cold emails, you buy a lot of domains, and it's some of the time people don't understand. So if you do, as you show, like Salesforge, and then you have try Salesforge, and people try to understand what's going on here. So and when you reply with a real, I mean, your position, your picture, so it's much more reliable. But at the very beginning, I would not recommend doing an HTML with a lot of links, etc.
Yeah, makes sense. Cool. So no links, no images in the first email, but yes, in the follow-ups, videos, GIFs. And one of the things I typically like sort of to do is to spice up my emails. And here's an example of sort of spicing up an email. So here's a guy named Cedric. Cedric is just a cool dude in sales, and I just used him. And it's pretty sort of, it's an older sort of image that I used from June last year, actually. But essentially, you can craft what I call programmatically unique sort of memes, GIFs, etc., to your prospects. And because the goal, just generally, that you have in sales and the marketing is to educate your audience, but also to entertain them also along the way, in a way. But so you may be talking about a problem in the email that you're trying to solve, but there's no response. And then, you know, you can make somebody's day. So you can brighten up essentially somebody's day by just sending a funny GIF or funny meme, etc. You know, so that can also trigger people. And then it really depends on the audience, really. So if you're going after, I don't know, lawyers, I would probably not do that. But if you're in my case, if you're going after salespeople or marketing people, I would probably do that, right? So, but it has to be something that's maybe a slightly bit more funny. So you can generate a bunch of interesting sort of GIFs for thousands of your prospects. And there's a tool, for example, that I use and I'm a customer of called video.io. It's vidu.io. And it allows you sort of programmatically to generate essentially memes and GIFs, etc. Super cool stuff. And it's just, you know, another way of how can you actually drive more responses. But again, I would not have this as my first email. I would have this as my second email, where you're just kind of chasing up, and it can easily increase your reply rates. Now, golden nugget number 11. I think this is more from your side, right? Daniel, was that correct?
Yeah. So the best ways to learn about deliverability and what's working is to ask other what they did, and actually this is what you showed here. So a great tip to understand is that you, as you just showed with the images or GIFs, but I would say here, if you have low reply rates but healthy domain that you know that no spam reports, no nothing. So it probably is the content that you need to improve. Okay, so how you want to test the content, we will show in the next slide. But yeah, so if your domain is healthy, your IP is healthy, but nobody is replying to you, so a few things might be the reason. First, maybe you are not targeting the right people, or your message is not something interesting, is not attractive. So this is what I would change. And on the other side, if you do a placement test when you send, I know, maybe you send to your friends, or you use some tool to send an email and to test where your email message is landing. But if everything goes to spam in this case, and nobody is seeing your message, so you need to go backwards and check what is your domain reputation. Then you need to check your message, and if everything is okay, so probably your domain is dead, and I would or fix the domain or buy a new domain.
Yep, makes sense. So here's, you know, you don't want to be this person essentially. And so I will say, you know, when it comes to, you know, how long should be my emails, And interesting thing I found out just from running millions of emails in my life is that, and also looking at our customers, is that typically, when you're targeting, like folks in the US or in the UK, you want to keep it sort of short and snappy. And typically I would say, maximum 50 words. Like write like a CEO would write, right? You're very busy, you don't have much time. Right, just maximum of 50 words and kind of constrain yourself, kind of try and get to that level. But interestingly, there are also markets like, for example, Germany is an example. Germans love really long emails for some reason. And actually, they're less likely to respond if you have very short emails. But if you have very long emails that really explains why you're reaching out in detail, then actually I've seen in the past with customers I used to work with that actually generates a lot more replies. So it's really kind of market dependent, I guess, ICP dependent, but also, the other thing, naturally, in the US and UK is because most people just get a lot more cold emails, and typically because a person only spends about 6-7 seconds to scan through the email on average, you want to kind of keep it short and snappy. You want to kind of get to the point as quickly as you can. Typically, I would say, I used to have this guy called Ryan from Australia. He used to say, no pain, no gain, no demo train. So essentially, really double down on the pain and why the hell you're reaching out to me. What is the pain that you can solve for me? And you don't necessarily have to talk about the solution that you're selling in that first email. That could be the second actually email, and some of the case studies maybe, or some of the proof points that you maybe want to outline. But in the first email, just tell me why the hell you're reaching out, and what is the pain, and what is the problem you can help me with. And if the person replies back, then you can say, hey, okay, this is how we're actually solving that for you. And the other reason kind of, why you don't necessarily want to be having sort of, long ass emails essentially is that still the majority of people just read the emails on the mobile device. I also read a lot of emails on the mobile device, especially when I'm on the go, in the car, I guess, or whatever. And, when you're writing an email, you can kind of send it to yourself, to your and just check it on your mobile device. Does the whole actually message fit on the screen, right? So here we got a guy named Nabil. Nabil just sent me an email saying that, he wants to work for us. And it just, it was a perfectly sort of crafted email. I know it's a bit lengthy, but it did fit into the whole screen. I didn't have to scroll. So essentially, if you're not scrolling, it's really good. And then the last gold nugget, essentially, if you want to check your deliverability, you want to be doing it consistently, so regularly, weekly basis, typically. And you can use Warmy as a tool to do that, and does a bunch of deliverability checks. Just to make sure you're always it's always good, and I think you can also do that via API, right, as well.
Correct.
Yeah, cool. So for any sophisticated folks out there, if you love API, and I know there's a lot of people that love API and they would love to check the domains sort of in the health of those more programmatically, then it's pretty cool that there's an API functionality as well. And that's it. Thank you so much, Daniel, for joining. Any final words that you would love to tell to the audience?
I think we have a question here. I want to tell, a few things about how spam filter works, or these companies, what they do. There are some. I attend every deliverability company that there is in the world, and I will tell you how does it work. There are companies making a lot of money, but how they make the money? They waking up every morning and thinking how I create a fake email address that someone will think it's a good ICP, and I will send him an email. So they are buying companies that are, dead companies, and they buy the domain and all the email accounts. And there is a marketing manager in the company or CEO, and you want to send him a cold email. But then what's going to happen? You send a cold email to the CEO, and you think it's a relevant company as an ICP for yourself. But actually, you landed in a spam trap, and this is the name of it. It's a spam trap. And when they detected, this is a guy from, I don't know, you said from Try Salesforge IO or what you just mentioned, and they said, okay, this domain is shit. He's sending cold emails because I am not existing. It's not a real person. And this is how everything started. And you showed that you need to verify your email addresses, and this verification actually need to find this spam traps. But these companies are very, very sophisticated when they're creating spam traps, and the verification tools not always can detect it, obviously, because they are very, very sophisticated. They can create fake LinkedIn accounts, etc. And then when they detected your domain as a spammer, they report to Google and Outlook, and they pay a lot of money to these companies. And there are, I think, tens of companies at detecting this, creating the spam traps. And I always try to understand what they're doing there. They don't reveal, but they, some of the time can tell you. We buy some companies or domains, from real companies, and that they're not existing anymore, creating LinkedIn accounts, and it's interesting. So they're very creative how to create fake email accounts in the world that you think it's a good ICP you send, and actually you land in a spam trap. And in that point, you probably will kill your domain and you can throw it away.
Yeah, makes sense. Awesome. So it was really great having you, Daniel, on the show. Really great chat. I think we went quite in depth with a lot of different bits. Just looking here whether we have any other questions here. Just somebody asked, what's a TAM company? TAM means just total addressable market. If anybody's wondering what that is, they just came from YouTube. Then just checking other questions. How do spam filters work and how to avoid getting caught in them? I think we answered that a fair bit. So somebody's asking, Justin, in the end is asking, does MailForge help with deliverability or does it need to be paired with Warmy? So yes, you can get MailForge and a bunch of domains and mailboxing. You can plug them into Warmy. Yes, you can do that because MailForge is just an infrastructure product. It does nothing on warming front. Yeah, I think that's about it. So yeah, if you got any questions, feel free to ask them directly to Daniel. Daniel, how can people find you?
They can find me by email, Daniel@Warmy.io. They can find me on LinkedIn. And I think you also, because you are the host, you also agreed to have a discount for all the people that will come to Warmy, right? 50% if they use a discount code, right? Salesforge.
Sure, whatever the discount code, feel free to give it.
So what is written on Frank's t-shirt, Salesforge 15 will give you 15%. People can find me everywhere. Related to deliverability and emails. I attend almost every conference. I'm on LinkedIn. I have an email address. I have a few actually, and yeah, we even met in person. Me and Frank in beautiful Lithuania, Vilnius, right? Yes. So we had a good time together. Also in person.
Cool. Thanks for the discount code, guys. Feel free to reach out to Daniel about anything that has to be on the warming front. And yeah, hopefully this was useful. If you got any feedback, feel free to also let me know. And then yeah, I'm always on LinkedIn, as most of you probably know. Cheerio. Thanks, guys.
Bye.